Welcome to the Happy Lawyer Project. I'm your host, Akoma Moronu, and I created this show to help lawyers find happiness in life with a law degree. Together with my guests, provide the knowledge, skills, insight, inspiration, and encouragement you need to find your happy. If any of you listen to James Altucher's podcast, then you know that there are a lot of comedians out there who are former lawyers or perhaps even just law school dropouts. And on today's show, I chat with Negin Yazdani, who's actually decided to pursue a slightly different path. She's a full-time in-house attorney at Virgin Orbit, and we will chat a little about that on the show, and she's a part-time stand-up comedian. Instead of leaving law to pursue comedy, we chat about how she's incorporated comedy into her day job, the lessons she's learned from stand-up that have served her well in her practice, and how mentorship from her general counsel has offered her continued opportunities to grow in the profession. I really hope you guys enjoy this episode. Hello and welcome back to the Happy Lawyer Project, lawyers. I am really excited to have you guys back on the show because I have a great guest today and she is doing some really interesting things in her spare time. So I am super excited to introduce you to Negin Yazdani. Was I even close?
You said it like a true Persian.
Oh, yeah. I appreciate that. Well, welcome to the show.
Yeah. Thank you. I'm so excited to talk to you.
So I think it'd be great if we could just start with a brief description of who you are and what it is that you're doing.
Sure. So I am a lawyer that is currently in Southern California working at a company called Virgin Orbit. And I am their actually only female attorney at this point. And I'm doing legal work for them sort of as a generalist. So I was hired to do their contracts, their vendor contracts mainly, and like streamline that process. And now have sort of grown into a role where I'm touching every aspect of the business, from customer contracts to employment issues to litigation and disputes to IP and trademarks. And you name it, I'm kind of everywhere. I'm everywhere you want to be, like Visa, I guess. So it's a great job. I'm constantly learning. And then outside of work, I get to also enjoy my life. And I do a little bit of comedy. And right now I'm working on doing a lot of stuff things that bring me joy, like hanging out with my friends, making people laugh, and doing anything artistic like singing or painting or playing basketball, if that counts as artistic, but just anything that brings me joy.
I am really excited to jump into a lot of that stuff because there seems to be a group of lawyers or, who overlap between lawyers and comedians. And I find that really interesting. But before we go to that, let's start with kind of your legal journey a little. Why did you end up in law school?
That's a great question. So I think I always wanted to do something very fulfilling that would in some way help advance my community or society. And it started off that I wanted to be a teacher. And then I quickly realized I don't have any patience for children, to be honest with you. I taught a children's class and I was like, I cannot do this. So then I was like, let's do law. No, I think I watched a lot of legal shows and that kind of got me interested in maybe being in the courtroom or negotiating. And then someone ended up saying you should take the LSAT. And I thought that the LSAT was fun. Like there's a games portion and I like games. So I ended up taking the LSAT and going into it thinking I was going to be more on the criminal side, and then realized, once I got in law school and did the internships and shadowed, mediations and things like that, I realized I do want to be on the civil side and ended up really finding that in-house law was the most fulfilling area for me.
That's very interesting that you went through that kind of trajectory. What was it about kind of in-house law because I've only recently went in-house, and I would, to be honest with you, and I've said this many times on the show, I never imagined myself in-house. I really liked being a specialist. That's what I liked about being at a firm, was getting to be really good at one thing. I liked the cadence of deal work. I kind of don't love the administrative part of being in-house. There's just a lot of bureaucracy sometimes, but I'm learning to love it and I'm actually enjoying it a lot more. But you were clearly picked up on it much quicker than I did, all of the pros of being in-house. But what was it about in-house that drew you to that role?
Yeah, so I was kind of the opposite. I was at a law firm for a while and I did enjoy the work, and I was mostly doing employment litigation and some other litigation work. And I didn't understand why I was so miserable there until I think I realized I was just really lonely. I was constantly in my own office by myself. If I talked to clients, it was on the phone once in a while, or, somebody would pass by my door and maybe talk to me for a few minutes, but most of the time I was just by myself. And then, when I went in-house, I didn't have an office anymore. I was just out in the open with everyone. I heard people laughing. People could come by and talk to me more easily. I would be able to speak with my clients, the people in the office every day, all the time. I could just walk over to them. They could come to me. We could schedule a meeting. So that part was, I think the main reason why I was definitely drawn to being in-house. But then also I learned that, especially in my current job, that I could work for a company and work for a product that I really believed in. And like at Virgin Orbit, we are trying to make space for everyone. And so that was a really fulfilling concept. It's improving technology, and the satellites that we're sending up into, or we want to send up into space, our clients, I really believe in their mission. So I get to be myself more, and I also get to be part of a product and a mission that I believe in more. And also another part of working in a startup, especially Virgin Orbit, they really value you as a person and your creativity and what you can bring to the table that's different from everyone else. And so one of my biggest things is I love being funny. I feel like it's a service. I feel like my best self when I'm able to have a little bit of a sense of humor. And I get to teach a comedy class here. They actually asked me to come and teach a comedy class. So I teach humor at the workplace and how that helps with resilience and things like that. So anyway, I'm able to really be who I am here and get to be around people and get to be part of this awesome project. So that's why I think I love being in-house.
Yeah. And I just wanted to point out that when you say making space for everyone, she doesn't mean like safe spaces for people, like creating space for people. She means like real space, like outer space.
Yeah, I think also I think that concept extends to making space for everyone.
Yes, no, I think that it's multi-layered.
Culture. Yeah, but yeah, you're right. Thank you for clarifying. This is a space company, aerospace company. So yeah.
It's like real space, like the legit scary kind.
Yeah, legit space. I like that.
But it's so great that you were able to bring that comedy into kind of your place of work. And I think that for so many people, being able to be who they are at work allows work to be a place they want to be. What is it about comedy? What draws you? Is it just the making people laugh? Is it the writing the jokes? What about comedy attracts you to performing?
That's a great question. I just know that I always loved to make people laugh. I loved to entertain. I would always put on shows for people since I was a kid. I would make videos that I thought were really funny. And then a lot of them were erased when my mom took the video camera to a party or something. But I had that energy and that inspiration from making videos and making jokes and making people laugh. It just was something that was deep inside me.
I was just wondering, a lot of people like to make people laugh. I think it makes it's contagious, but it's very different to go from it's fun to tell jokes at a dinner party to thinking I want to tell jokes to people who don't know me and might not laugh. So there's a risk and the performative aspect of it. When did that decision come about? When were you I should actually do jokes? I don't even know what the correct verb is.
Yeah. So when I moved to LA a couple years ago, I didn't have a lot of friends here. And I was like, how could I, combine my desire to make people laugh and I need to make friends. And I found that there was a comedy class teaching women how to do stand-up. And I was like, okay, cool. This is it. So it was either that or improv, I guess. And so I tried stand-up. I had never tried that before. And it taught me so much, so many useful things that even when I'm not on stage, I'm still using them. like writing jokes or thinking of things that are funny about every situation is just so useful. Like one of the jokes that I tell, and I think that usually gets a laugh, is that I was actually in a car accident. And when I was in the accident, I was like, this is awful. What am I going to do? It was this awful, awful thing. And then as I sat in the car after and thought about what happened, I was like, oh, wait, that's really funny. And I told some of the jokes that I thought of in my head to my comedy class. They all laughed. And so I started incorporating it into my set. And so like one of the jokes, for example, is, I was in a car accident recently and I didn't know what information to get or what documents to ask for. So I grabbed my phone to call my boyfriend. And then I remembered that I don't have a boyfriend. And that's like, it was such a truth, honest thing. I really grabbed my phone and was like, oh, wait. And so like I wrote it into a joke, and then I called my dad and he didn't pick up. And then it was like a whole thing, like, but me and Robert Accident have been texting a lot lately, and because he needs my insurance information, but I think it's going to lead to something more. So it just became this, like, the silver lining was that I was able to find the humor in something that was going to cost me money. It was going to cost me inconvenience and time. And I was able to make light of it. And so now that is a strategy that I use in my life when I'm stressed out. Like, what's the funny in this? Like, can I put this in my set, or is there something else? I could just take some of the stress away by making it funny. And I also think that making people laugh is a service. And, one of the things that when you're not your best and you're not feeling your best, when you're feeling low and sad, the best thing I think you can do is to do something for somebody else, whether that is actually doing an act of service or maybe making somebody laugh. And I think when I hear people laugh, I feel, because of what I've said, I feel good. I feel like I've done a service. And every time before we do our shows, me and the group that I do comedy with, we always hold hands and we say a prayer that, may we make people laugh, may we leave them better than when they came. So that's part of the draw.
I really love the way you're characterizing this journey into comedy and the way you use comedy, because I think for so many people on its face, when you think about a lawyer, you think of something very serious and something very impactful and something, very integral to society. And then when you think about comedy, you think of it as being very frivolous and very like, almost like a class clown is like, and they don't seem to reconcile. But when you think about comedy as a service, and when you think about comedy as something you can do for someone in their time of need, there's a lot of overlap with that desire to be a lawyer. And I think that that's really cool. And I'd never thought about it like that. Tell me more. What else did you learn doing stand-up, or that you've learned kind of teaching these comedy classes at work that other lawyers could benefit from in their kind of professional lives?
Some of the things that I've learned are like, when you're up there, first of all, you got to know that the audience is on your side and people want you to do well. Even if that's not always true, you got to believe that. Like, and I think that translates for lawyers. Sometimes you feel like you can't do something, and maybe you feel like, your coworker doesn't want you to succeed, or your boss doesn't want you to succeed, but maybe you can just try it on that everybody does want you to do well, and they're on your side and they want to have a good time, just like they want you to do well. They want to laugh, just like your audience.
No, what I'm saying? Yeah, that completely makes sense. And I think that sometimes lawyers can self-sabotage because they think people are out to get them, or that they don't have the support of the people around them.
Totally.
And sometimes just believing that the partner isn't giving you negative feedback because they want you to fail. They're giving you that feedback because they want you to improve. And everything is really just a feedback mechanism. And where an audience is laughing, partners give feedback in different ways. Unfortunately, it's not as, as, and I don't know, maybe a non-laughter is just as brutal as a bad markup. I don't know, but
yeah,
it's just feedback about kind of what you're doing. And it's not necessarily them out to get you. Like, they're not there to have you have a bad night on stage.
Yeah.
Nobody comes out to ruin a comedian's career,
Right. And it's funny because, you got to believe in yourself, because every audience is different. I've told jokes in front of one audience and they died. And then I said that same joke in front of a completely different audience and it went flat. So it's not always you necessarily. You could do the same presentation in front of two different audiences and have a different reaction. Doesn't mean what one audience is right or wrong. It's just, you just got to have the courage to go up there and do your best and believe in yourself. And sometimes it works out and sometimes it doesn't, but it's not a reflection necessarily of you and your capabilities.
Yep. And I think that in some ways, especially for lawyers who work at like firms, I think sometimes people want to work with partners who are just like them because they understand what those partners want because they think just like those partners. But the value of working with partners who have different expectations is you learn how to stretch the analogy, adapt your jokes to different audiences, and you become a better lawyer, you become a better comedian when you're better able to read the room.
Yes. And be present.
Exactly. Completely. So are you someone who never had stage fright? Because they always, that old saying, which I don't even know if it's true, that more people are afraid of public speaking than are of death. Like, are you someone who didn't struggle to be on stage, or was that something that you've overcome through this stand-up?
No, absolutely not. I was terrified. And still to this day, people think it gets easier. I mean, I think it's hard. I think every time I go on stage, it's scary. And there are times when, like the first time I ever did stand up, I think I forgot everything I was going to say right before I went on stage. And I was like, oh my God.
I'm like mortified for you right now.
Yeah, it was so scary. And, I said this so many times in my head and out loud that when I went up there, I was able to do it. But it's really scary. And it's scary every time you do it, I think.
And that in itself, I think, is such a good muscle to build, is to like be afraid and do it anyway.
Yeah. Yeah. And when you're on stage, though, finally, like when you're like writing the jokes and telling them and figuring out your set is one thing. And that's the scary part, I think. But once you're on stage, after a while of doing this, that's when I'm the most happy. And that's when I'm the most at ease. Once I'm finally on stage, it's like, I'm just able to be present, and that you forget that until you actually get on stage and get off stage and you're on this high. But the lead up is so scary.
And is there anything you do to manage that anxiety in the lead up? Is there anything you say to yourself? Is there any rituals? Like, how do you get yourself to step out on that stage every time if it causes those butterflies every time?
Yeah, a lot of times I'm like, why did I do this? Like, I think that pretty much every single time I sign up for a show and it's like getting close, like, why did I do this again? And I'm never going to do this again. And then I tell myself I'm doing a service, and that actually really helps me to say that I'm doing a service. And some of the shows that I actually do, they're for fundraisers or like, for a good cause for foster kids or, things like that. So then I just remind myself this is a service. And your jokes are funny and you can do this. And then I get up there.
And probably it's not your favorite thing to talk about. Have you ever like truly bombed? And what is coming back from that like?
No, I have definitely bombed. I mean, I've always gotten like some laughs. I've never been to a show where it was completely silent, thankfully, knock on wood, because I think I've had a lot of good support. I mean, some of my friends have always been to all of my shows, and I've definitely bombed, and it's not like I didn't get any laughs. It's never been totally silent during a set, but I do remember that there was one important show that I started off getting good laughs, and then towards the end, I didn't get any. And, at first I came down the stairs and felt like, man, I really bombed, and how could this happen? And it was really down on myself. Sometimes that negative self-talk really comes out. But then I was like, no, I'm not going to do this. I wrote jokes for this show specifically. I did my best. People did laugh, and I did a great job. And I was able to like move on from it. I think it's still to this day, I think that was one of my better shows, even though there were some parts where I really just thought people were going to laugh, and I felt like no one laughed at all.
It's so interesting because it's kind of this relationship with the audience, right? Like you can write jokes that you think are hilarious. And if they don't laugh, they don't laugh. And you might tell a joke that you thought was kind of like a throwaway joke and they think it's hilarious. And you're like, well, okay. What is your creative process like? Like, how do you write your jokes? How do you prepare for your shows? like, I'm kind of obsessed with comedians' process and like, I like, how Jerry Seinfeld writes his jokes, or how someone, like Sarah Silverman writes her jokes. Do you have a really developed process? Or are you still really in the early stages of kind of figuring out how to put a set together?
I think I'm still somewhat in the early stages, but the way that I do it is that usually I take a lot of inspiration from my daily conversations. And if I say something that makes a lot of people laugh, then sometimes I'll write it down and be like, okay, that worked. So that makes up for some jokes. And so I take the experiences too that don't go well, that I can find humor in. And I think that works really well. I take experiences that I think other people can relate to as well. Like I recently got a flu shot, and it was such a weird, awful experience because I'm so scared of needles. And so I'm writing a joke right now about how like I got the flu shot, and now like if anyone coughs, I'm like, bring it on, bitch. Like I thought I was Superman or something after I got it. And I just like want to make sure that everyone else got their flu shot, because not because I care if they got the flu, but more because like I had to get it and it was really awful.
I've never had the flu shot, so I'm definitely not.
I think the funny thing is I got the flu shot last week and I think I'm sick right now. So this didn't work out very well.
That's my exact fear. I feel like everybody who gets the flu shot gets sick right away.
Yeah. So
it's a conspiracy.
I agree. I think 1 year I had the flu shot and it was the worst I've ever gotten sick was that year. So who knows? Jury's out on whether that's the thing to do or not. But yeah, I think there's humor in everything. And what I teach in my class is like, there are so many things that we can complain about at work, for example. But if we make light of it and bring out the funny, then it's enjoyable for everybody. So that's some of the inspiration I take too. Like, whatever I'm complaining about, sometimes I'm like, how can I? It's usually a universal experience, like flu shots. Like nobody loves getting a flu shot, so that could be a really great premise for a joke. And I said the example of making space for everyone. Somebody in my class actually made a joke that Virgin Orbit says make space for everyone except in our parking lot, because it's always so crowded in our parking lot. So it's really it's a concept you can apply to anything, and we could be complaining about how there's no spots in our parking lot, or we can make a funny joke about it and all relate.
Do you find yourself trying out jokes on people like in everyday conversation? Sometimes
I do, and I see that most come out when I'm with my comedian friends, and it actually drives me crazy. Like I can't sometimes, like when they're trying jokes on me or when I'm trying jokes on them, like I can't hang out right now. Like this is not, I don't know why. It's just
this is not how real
too
people,
much.
Yeah.
It's really funny when I'm with them, but sometimes it's just like, is this an open mic? Like what's happening? But yeah, I'm trying jokes, and if somebody does laugh and I wasn't even trying, I always write it down to see if I can add it to a set.
Do you carry like a little book around, or is it like on your phone, you just record it verbally?
It's not very organized. I put it in my phone. I have like something on my desk at work. I have a book in my car. So
okay. So you just keep track. Yeah. It's a process. Mm-hmm. I'd be interested to know if you have any thoughts on this. Is it harder to get kind of, and you might say you haven't found it to be hard in either situation, but do you think it's harder to break into the legal profession or into comedy as a young woman of color?
I mean, I think if you want to be really successful in comedy, I think comedy's harder. Luckily, I'm not going down that path, but I watch my friends do it. It's tough. It's really tough to become like, an Amy Schumer or Ali Wong or something like that. Like it takes a long time, and it takes a lot of writing and bombing and stress and rejection. Whereas I kind of just perform here and there. Your life, if you want to break into comedy, is like all the time, 24/7. That's kind of what you're doing. And you have very little reward in the beginning. You're not paid very well. And like you said, it's a very male-dominated field. So I think it's actually way harder to break in and be really successful. Whereas as a lawyer, I think it is tough, don't get me wrong, but, especially as a woman of color, but I think that you're able to be successful a little bit easier if you can make decent connections and go to the right networking events, you can land a job and you can get paid for for the area that you want to do, and you can move up. And a lot more people are able to do that. So
yeah, I think if anything, I'm not surprised by that answer just because it seems like a numbers game and there's just a lot more lawyers than there are really successful comedians. So I would assume it's slightly, and it's also, there's no path, I think to being a comedian, it's just really just grinding it out from what I can tell, and really just performing as much as you can perform, get in front of as many people as you can get in front of, and just hope that one day the right video goes viral or the right person's in the audience. And it's hard.
Exactly. And that the show at the Laugh Factory once, and I was so excited and nervous because I thought they were going to record it, and then maybe like if they liked one of my clips, then maybe they'll put it on their YouTube channel or their Instagram, and they ended up not even recording that night. So I finally got my chance to be at the Laugh Factory, and nothing came of it.
That's so terrible.
Things like that always are happening. So. Yeah.
Well, it's also great though sometimes to just have something that makes you feel good and that kind of gives you that high without all of the stress and pressure of being quote unquote successful. Because I think that law probably already does plenty of that.
Oh, totally.
So in trying to manage kind of your day job and your night passion, I assume comedy is always a nighttime thing, but I guess you could probably do it in the daytime. Are there any habits or strategies that you live by that help you keep it all together and that really drive your success?
Yeah. So I follow my gut, in that what got me to here was that I was in the Bay Area, I was at another job, and I just followed my gut. I knew that I was supposed to be in LA. So I moved down here. I found a job at Virgin Orbit, and I found this comedy class, and I knew that I was supposed to take that. I just followed my gut. And then I also really, to get to success, I really tried to delve in and get out of my comfort zone in a way. Like when I was looking for a new job, I brainstormed all the ways that I could potentially get the job. Like I took a class on job search and how to efficiently do it. I networked, I went to events, I asked questions and got curious of people that I looked up to and said, how did you get that in-house position? I emailed my contacts, my resume. And so that's something that I usually do, even at work. So like when I'm trying to be successful in some aspect of work, I really delve in. I try to do everything I can to ensure success. If I want to be a better manager, I'll read articles. I'll talk to people that are managers. I'll make a list of my goals as a manager and try to see how I can become that. So I guess I'd say I follow my gut and I delve in and get out of my comfort zone when I'm trying to become successful.
I love the phrase that you used, that you got curious. I think that sometimes people get a little bit too like goal oriented, and they're like, they want to read in order to be a good manager. And so they're like, I'll read this book and then I'll become a good manager. But there's something about being curious that like kind of is a little bit more flexible and a little bit more organic and maybe authentic, because you're following, I guess curious is kind of that gut, following your gut about what is interesting to you about the idea of being a good manager. Because for some people, it is about getting better results. For other people, it is about the managing of people and like human, like relationships and psychology. And for other people, it's about like the organizational, structure and how do people work in groups. And, there's all the different ways you could look at being a manager, and following the path that's interesting to you will bring you better results. And so I really love that phrase. So you manage that you do delve in and that you do like to do research when you do stuff, which I think is very typical of us lawyers. So I'd love to know if there are any resources that you would recommend for lawyers out there who are perhaps trying to pursue something that they're scared of, or who are trying to advance their career. Because I think these are two things that you've done quite well in your time. Have you read anything? Do you listen to any podcasts? Are there any groups that you're a part of that have been really helpful in those endeavors?
Yeah, there are a few things that I've done. I think getting curious is one of them. I think when you are able to go and find people that are living at least in one aspect of life in the way that you're looking to live your life, so if you find somebody you look up to find out how they got there, how they got that dream of yours is really helpful and can, help in your search to get there. Networking is also a really good tactic. I also recently took this self-improvement course called Landmark, and I think that was really helpful in making sure that I could see that I could have what I wanted in life if I really went after it and took responsibility and not acted as a victim. And they had a lot of really good practical tips for how to live your life in general, but also to really make the most of your life. So I think I would recommend that. There are a few books I'm reading right now. I haven't finished them, but I think that they're really excellent resources right now. And one of them is called Emotional Intelligence 2.0. And the other one is You Are a Badass.
That's so funny.
Are you reading it right now?
I read it when it first came out, yeah.
Oh, really?
And I've just recently finished her You Are Badass with Money book, her finance book. I think the tone of it is a good in-between of personal development and, kind of like really out there woo-woo stuff that for some people is a little too much. Mm-hmm. The thing I really like about what you said, which I just wanted to highlight really quickly, is that the Landmark course helped you take responsibility. And I was really nervous that you were going to say that it would be possible to accomplish your dreams if you worked hard. Because I think sometimes as lawyers, we think that if we just work hard enough, if we just put in the hours and just work hard enough, everything will work out. And sometimes what we're not doing is really taking responsibility for kind of picking our head up and thinking, is this work the right work? Is this work the work? Am I moving in the right direction? Do you know what I mean? It's not that if I just bill the hours and if I just get all the A's, that eventually someone will notice me and like gift me my dream life. You have to actually take responsibility for creating a vision for your life, figuring out what steps you would need to take to achieve that vision, and then like actually moving in that direction. And it's not just hard work. It's also a little bit of insight and a little bit of inspiration.
Yeah. Sometimes you need to reevaluate if that's the right path, if it's not working out.
Absolutely. I'm a firm believer in taking responsibility for your own life.
Yeah. I was also going to mention that it's okay to ask for help. And I've had some coaching in getting to my path. I actually have a really great coach. Her name is Caroline Jordan. And anytime I'm not sure or I'm upset about something not going right, I always call her and she kind of helps me plan out what steps to take and how to get what I want if that's the right path for me. In moving down to LA, she was a really big part of helping me figure out how to do that and whether it was the right choice. So I would definitely also recommend finding someone you trust to coach you in those, either in your career or in life in general, to get where you want to be.
I'm such a huge advocate for coaching. And I think that it's really coaching is, we all know what the word means. And I think that in a lot of areas of our life, we're very comfortable with that word. Like if you wanted to be better at a physical sport, getting a coach seems obvious. Like Michael Jordan had a coach, like Kobe Bryant had a coach, Tiger Woods had a coach, and we're fine with that. But then when we talk about our internal, like personal selves, it seems weird because we think that that's already fully formed. Like, why would I need coaching to be who I am? I'm already who I am. But sometimes having an independent third party who's trained just like a sports coach is in bringing out the best in you can help you train the right muscles, can help you do the right exercises, can help you focus on the right things to reach that next level.
Totally. And I think even, CEOs have coaches. The best of the best have coaches. And so I think, if you're struggling, especially in an area, it's such a helpful thing to do, even if it's like 1 or 2 sessions, just to kind of help you. Yeah, I agree.
Oprah has a coach.
Oprah has a coach? Oh, yeah. Then
I mean, if Oprah has a coach, I don't know who's too good for a coach.
Exactly.
She is like America's coach.
Yeah. I think I think that my current boss right now, he's not only my boss, but this incredible lawyer, Derek Boston. He's also my mentor. And almost every single day, we will walk the shop floor at work, probably for a half an hour. And I'll just go through the questions that I have that came up throughout the day. And he'll ask me questions on how I think, how I should handle it. And that has helped me become such a better lawyer, just to have him there, somebody with, 20 plus more years of experience than me, to help me think out of the box and think about the right ways of analyzing each situation. So that's been really helpful. And luckily that's part, I get that as part of working here, but that's something I would honestly pay for if he wasn't my boss, to help me become a better attorney.
It's so invaluable to have people, to work for people who you don't just like working with, but who are willing to take the time to do that for you. Yeah. And because sometimes you can work for great people who are just themselves busy and trying to, progress in their own careers and have balanced their own lives. And they just don't have the time and don't place a priority on that mentoring. Luckily, I think a lot of lawyers do, because lawyers tend to be people, which is why we went into this profession in the first instance.
Mm-hmm. Yeah.
But as I told you before we got on, the GC who recruited me into my current role was somebody who I and still look up to very much. He's somebody who, when I saw the way in which he had built a life, it wasn't just that I really liked the way he practiced law. I really liked the entire life he had kind of built for himself. And I think that's really rare to find. To your point earlier about finding somebody who has achieved one of your dreams, I think sometimes we have to compartmentalize, right? Like, this person's the type of lawyer I want to be. This person's the type of social, charitable. Yeah. Exactly. This person is the type of mom I would like to be. This person, but to find somebody who is the type of parent you would like to be, the type of spouse or the type of friend, and the type of, lawyer, and his the charitable organization that him and his wife have started is the type of thing that I would love to start if I ever had that much wealth, mm-hmm. And he owns homes in all these countries where I would love to own, you know what I mean? And I think sometimes you find people, once in a lifetime, you find that type of person. And I think when you do, and in my instance, even though I had never thought about being in-house, that's when you leap, because you're like, well, if he thought this place was a good transition for him and he thinks I would be a good fit, I'm just going to trust my gut on this one and I'm going to do it. So you're very lucky to have someone like that in your life. And I'm so sad to no longer have him in mine. But I think that everybody should, the thing I want people to take away from this is that is possible. I think a lot of lawyers out there look up at the people ahead of them and don't see happy people there. Mm-hmm. And so to let people know that not everyone's like that, and not everyone's relationship with their career and their colleagues is like that. So if you haven't found that person, just keep looking, because they do exist. Yeah.
My boss was just telling me today that he had a mentor who helped him in the same way that he's helping me. And so they do exist. They do exist. And also, randomly, I was just thinking, another sometimes type of person that I look to recently is kids. We have so much to learn from them. It's crazy.
I know.
You don't think it, but I don't have kids, but we recently had some kids here. We were giving a tour of the factory, and they were just so full of joy and so confident, and they weren't so worried about what everyone else thought of them. We would ask a question and all their hands would go up immediately, and they would give answers that were totally wrong, but they didn't care about what they looked like in front of everybody else. They were just living their life and enjoying and being in a rocket factory and being happy and getting curious and raising their hand and giving answers and getting excited. We as adults have so many insecurities, and we suffer from it. If I raise my hand and say this, or if I go on stage, is everyone going to think that I'm that I'm bad at this, or that I'm dumb, or, something like that. We always make up these stories in our head about what is everyone else going to think? And is it going to be negative? And we can learn from kids sometimes that, first of all, not everyone is watching us, and not everyone's concerned with what we're saying and what we're doing and who we are. So there's that. And just if to be happy and to be a happy lawyer sometimes is like not caring so much about what other people think and just living your true authentic self and just, being in the moment, being excited and acting free like kids do.
I'm so happy you brought that up because no one has brought that up yet on the show after over 100 episodes. And I think it's such a good point. And I'm constantly reminded by my children that a lot of that anxiety that we get as adults was kind of something we grew into. Yeah. And sometimes, my kids will do something that I would be horrified if I did. And I know my instinct is to be like, are you okay? Like, do you feel bad? And they're like, why? And I'm like, well, you just did something that made you look like a complete idiot. Do you know what I mean? But they have no clue. Like they're already in the next moment, and that they don't live in kind of their regrets and their fears and their embarrassments. And it's so amazing. And as parents, I always have to kind of take that step back and try to not protect them from their feelings, especially feelings they're not even having, because often I'm just projecting my own insecurities onto them. That's fantastic. So before we wrap up, I'd love if you could share what's the best way. I know that you mentioned that you're going to start doing more on social media and stuff. So what's the best way for people to start following you and see you in action?
I think that my Instagram page is probably the best. So it's Negsi, Negsi at Negsi, and I'm public, so people can follow me. Sometimes I'll add clips of my stand-up on there, or I want to make more funny videos, either as stories or to post on my page. So I think you can get a little bit there. And if you come to Virgin Orbit ever, I'm happy to include you in one of my comedy classes or give you a tour of the factory floor. So send me a message.
That's so exciting. One of my very good friends from high school lives out in LA, and he is a rocket scientist. He does propulsion stuff, but it's
cool.
He actually he used to work on roller coasters. Now he's started his own startup. But all of those, you smarty pants out there in California doing like interesting things. So if anybody else is out, if anyone needs a little tour of a rocket factory, which sounds so much cooler. I work in helicopters, which people always think is cool, but like rockets are so much cooler than helicopters.
Oh my gosh, that's awesome. We should talk more.
I know, we were both in somewhat aviation. Your aviation is higher than mine. Well, thank you so much for being a part of this project and for sharing your story. I think it's so great to hear what you're up to. And I think there was a lot of value in our conversation today. So I really appreciate it. And the last thing I want to ask you, which I ask everybody who comes on the show, is what do you think separates happy lawyers from those lawyers who struggle to find happiness in life with a law degree?
Well, I think part of it is gratitude. I think it's not just lawyers, but people have a tendency to complain sometimes about their job. And sometimes it is, you got to be grateful for the job that you have. Even though I love my job now, there's definitely things that I could complain about and reasons why I could dislike my job. But I choose to be grateful for it. But I've also, like I said in the beginning of the podcast, been able to find a good fit for myself. So I think I was able to figure out my priorities and work that I needed to have in order to be happy and motivated to work hard. And that was to have somewhat of a social environment where I wasn't alone all the time and that I got to work with a product that I really believed in. So those are some non-negotiables that I think, especially after a few years of being an attorney, you have the right to have. When you first start, you kind of just a lot of times go into a job just to get a job. At least that's how it was for me when I first started out in the job market. But after you have a little bit of experience under your belt, you can have a couple of those non-negotiables. And once you find a great job, I think you're grateful. And then I heard also today in general that part of happiness is giving and growing. Mm-hmm. So if you are able to give in some way, some act of service at your job on a daily basis, whether that's the product that you're working for, or if you're able to make people laugh at work, that kind of giving brings you happiness, but also growing, becoming better, learning more. Those are things I think if you're able to do consistently, then you should be happier in your job than people who are maybe stuck at a job where they're not growing and they're not learning and they're not able to connect with the company that they're at and whatever their business is, what they're selling.
I think that you've done a really wonderful job of really thinking about your purpose and tying purpose into everything that you do. And whether that's kind of the mission of the company that you work at and get to support, but also the purpose of performing comedy. And a lot of that to me seems like a reframing and a mindset. And to your point about gratitude, it's really being grateful about the opportunities that you're being given and viewing them in a positive light. Because I know that, the same person could have the same opportunities as you and view them completely differently and totally be missing all of the opportunities they have to be grateful and to really appreciate what their contributions are. There's that old story about the two janitors, and the one who's unhappy is the one who thinks he spends his day cleaning up after disgusting, disrespectful kids, and the other one who thinks he has the privilege and honor of getting to create a clean environment for children during their most innocent time. And just in saying those two different perspectives, you can see how they would come to work so differently, how they would engage with the kids so differently, and how their lives over the course of their careers would be so different. So perspective is everything. And I think that you have such an amazing perspective in everything that you do. So I really appreciate you being on.
Thank you so much. I had so much fun talking to you, and I'm honored that I got to be here with you. So thank you so much for taking the time to talk to me.
Thanks for listening.